Hey everyone, it's Kong again, and here's another episode of Should You Summon. As always, I'll be presenting high-level overviews using these 4 criteria to help you decide whether this banner is worth your hard-earned vouchers and crystals. How these characters fit into your team, whether they unlock any bonds, what kind of content they get used for, and their future availability. So let's jump right into this Raid Up banner featuring Rainforce and the Sage of the Trees, running from April 15th to the 28th. Since it's not a Destiny banner, you have a 40% chance of getting each on-banner character, with the remaining 20% reserved for any off-banner hero in the regular summoning pool. So let's get started with Rainforce. I mentioned in my last episode covering Rainforce that he's a complicated character with a lot of moving parts who can surprise unsuspecting players. Partly because of that, there have been some inaccurate or understated or overstated guides out there. Rather than risk contributing to that myself, I thought I'd get one of the world's foremost Rainforce experts on the show instead. Over to you, CATA.
Rainforce, or Rain, is an AoE-based disruptor with some assassin leanings. He needs Gizzeroff for his 4th bond and Sigma for his 5th bond. Brenda, Shalinka, and Varash need Rainforce for their bonds. His factions are Yuless Legends, Strategic Masters, and Mythical Realm. His preferred class is Sword Saint. His talent grants a unique mechanic of Otherworldly Force. Rain receives 1 stack of Otherworldly Force per enemy he deals damage to, with 1 stack granting 4% to all stats other than HP at 6-star. Upon reaching 7 stacks, Rain will immediately act again, and after moving, he will teleport adjacent to the closest ally, or stay in place if an ally is already adjacent. All stacks of Otherworldly Force are also removed after acting, so he must stack again. Everything Rain does revolves around getting stacks of Otherworldly Force to eventually act again. This is enabled by his 1-cost skill, Sonic Blade, a 6-range line AoE that has no cooldown if it crits, and Eclipse, a 4-range teleport that has Rain deal 0.3 times damage in 2 blocks. It also deals 1 strong debuff if it crits, and steals 1 buff from each opponent hit. His Disruptor role is chiefly enabled by Eclipse and his 3C, which swaps the position of all units hit. This is not likely on 3C, however. The only tiles enemies can be swapped to are ones they are already occupying. That makes his swap much more deterministic, and you can remove enemies from your range to better ensure that you get the swap you're looking for. His 3C is a potent tool for this swap alone, but it also applies 1 to 3 stacks of burn, depending on if 1 to 3 enemies are hit. If he hits 3 enemies, his 3C's cooldown is totally refreshed. That said, the 3C only has a 0.2 times damage modifier, so the damage is on the weaker end. Burn deals 1 times Rain's attack and fixed damage. The large amount of debuffs, the damage, the swapping, and the spammability of his 3C cement Rain's role as a disruptor. If not properly respected, Rain can crush teams by himself and then teleport back to his team out of reach of retaliation for free. The act again at 7 stacks is what gives him his assassin leanings, along with the swap of his 3C potentially moving someone out of guard range of the tank. In the former scenario, he can kill many units out of range of the tank by moving in with Eclipse, hitting them with the AoE, then acting again and killing them. In the latter scenario, even guarded enemies can be assassinated with the proper swap, though this tends to take more time as it is harder to get his act again with his 3C compared to Eclipse. The fundamentals of playing Rainforce are all about getting stacks of Otherworldly Force and determining whether to debuff with 3C or use Eclipse's better range to get the act again more quickly and potentially assassinate someone. Eclipse can also be used to get you to enough stacks that you can double 3C next turn, or 3C swap and snipe. He mostly looks to get stacks otherwise from Sonic Blade, which has great range and a high chance of having no cooldown. Note for the purpose of his teleports and commands, he will receive command only if it is in range of where he teleported to, not where he teleports from. Rain also has the option of becoming a more pure AoE DPS and dropping 3C for Star Stab, but this is not a road one would commonly take. This should only be considered in a dedicated AoE comp, and if 3C won't be effective because of, say, Rosin Seal, or the characters likely having Bracer Emblem. And even then, Air Slash can be considered instead to increase his threat range and potentially help bust a tank, or help zone. Despite the high focus on AoE and the 20% attack troop mods, Rainforce grants a scaling attack bonus to his troops from Otherworldly Force, has Air Slash, and also has Legion, which grants 10% attack and defense above 90% HP, and Ruthless, which grants 20% critical damage. With Demon Slayer, he can be a competent single target DPS, but he is always at his best when there are enough targets for him to be able to use his 3C. Many boss fights can fit this criteria, and thanks to his reliable crit rate, he'll debuff with Demon Slayer every turn. He works best if he can take the boss's counter on enemy phase, as that will allow him to stack at double the speed. Generally though, there are better units to use, but he can be used if you like him. Finally, Rainforce has a wide range of applications and other non-bossing PvE. In Time Rift, Timeless Trials, and Story, he can easily break and lure enemy formations from afar with Sonic Blade, or cripple and sometimes outright kill them with applications of his 3C, both at no fear of retaliation. While he is usable in Fenrir and Nidhogg with regards to Ancient Beckoning, he is far away from a competitive option there, and has little to no usage in Eternal Temple. He can be used in some challenge maps if buff stealing is useful, but there are better options for this, even the free Oliver, or if there are many enemies so he can easily act again. For weapon, Rainforce should use Balanced Blade or Demon Slayer. Balanced Blade makes Eclipse a much more potent stacking tool, as 3 block range versus 2 block range is a big difference. The additional range on Sonic Blade means he can attack mages with AoEs without fear of reprisal, as they have 6 range to his 7. He can do the same to flyers and cavalry. In general, Balanced Blade will make Rainforce stack much faster, and he can also stack without worry of being countered. Demon Slayer, on the other hand, doubles down on his disruption, adding 1 debuff and removing 1 buff if he lands a critical hit. It also makes him a better DPS, but this comes at the cost of range and stacking speed. There are situations and enemies where you would prefer to have one or the other, but if you have to pick one, then Balanced Blade is his standard loadout. Consider running Tier 2 Konichi with Demon Slayer. You may balk at the idea of running a Tier 2 troop, but if you don't have any plans to assassinate, the additional debuff can be a potent tool versus Rosin, or just for general disruption. That Rainforce on crit will deal 6 debuffs with 3C if he's stacked to 7 thanks to his unique. He'll deal 5 debuffs on the previous 3C, thus Rain with Demon Slayer can fully wipe 5 Rosin stacks and hit them with the 3C and the Reen debuff pool from his unique, plus 2 additional stat debuffs. For armor, quite a few heavy armor choices are good. A lot of this comes down to preference. Mirror armor is good versus Mariel, and generally synergizes well with his usage in PvE. Aeolus or Giant's Resolve are also options. For Helm, Tyr is what immediately comes to mind for most heavy armor DPS, but on Rain, Tyr is actually not that helpful as Rain is constantly attacking and thus he frequently can't get Tyr's effect. Tyr can help you in precisely 2 places, your first Sonic Blade and if you miss a Sonic Blade crit. In the former scenario, the damage is negligible. In the latter scenario, you are more likely to want to use Eclipse or 3C there instead of just waiting a turn. There are a few options otherwise. You can run Chief's Helmet for the utility of 1 turn of heal block prevention, Aeneas for the supreme durability, or Vampire Mask to put out some additional debuffs when Rain goes in. For accessory, he should use his unique. It's a free Apex boot, and his unique grants him the ability to pass through enemies at 4 stacks and gives him Reen's debuff pool when he is on 7 stacks. Barring that, Slayer's Emblem, Judge Talisman, or Apex Boot are his best choices. For Enchant, he has a few options: Breeze, Full Moon, and Blazing Sun. Full Moon is the best defensively, Blazing Sun outputs the best damage when you crit, and Breeze's additional mobility and 10% damage are appreciated on any DPS, but the +2 mobility is especially appreciated on Rain to give him more opportunities for plays. Rain's troops are somewhat limited on the other hand. Generally he runs heavy infantry for their great bulk and solid damage. He can also use samurai, which are very nice in PvE for giving him true range counter, and in PvP are good because of assassins being type neutral. Berserkers are a higher damage option over heavy infantry only when they crit, and are not recommended because of this. Otherwise he can run exorcists, who aren't great at attacking but have good defensive benefits, and type neutrality. As far as his factions go, in the Less Legends faction, Rain plays nicely with any other AoE YL characters, and of course, Landius. He can enable Sigma and Oliver to get kills they otherwise may not get. Angelina is a great partner for him. Her pushback and alternate are 2 strong tools to let Rain get more stacks safely, and she can contribute to the AoE combo. Sage of the Trees by the same respect. In the Mythical Realm faction, Rain plays better with Sage of the Trees than he does with Gizaroth. Sage of the Trees gives Rain 2 mobility to retreat on light array tiles, and also has his 3C to push enemies away that may be threatening Rainforce. All in all, he allows Rainforce to be a lot more aggressive and is also a potent body blocker, limiting enemies' access to threatening Rain on top. Gizaroth is still a decent buff for Rain. Gizaroth will use his construct debuffs and body blocking to protect him. Otherwise, pair with debuff AoE characters such as Balzel and Reen. In the Strategic Masters faction, Alucia and Hiller are a solid strat core that give you a guaranteed Magic Guard tank in PvP. He plays nicely with other AoE characters like Knight of Mystery and Olivier. His viability in PvP should hopefully be sufficiently proven by the replay I had playing. Thanks for listening this long. I hope this basic guide on Rainforce was helpful. Bye!
Alright, thanks for that detailed analysis, CATA, and now, of course, I want to build my Rainforce, so better move on before that temptation really sinks in. Next up, we've got the Sage of the Trees. Oldius. Oldmandius. Husbandius? He's a well-rounded support unit who specializes in frustrating enemy movement. His talent boosts his int if there are allies nearby, and makes it so he doesn't suffer melee combat penalties, which means he's perfectly capable of chipping in with some DPS, especially if you bring lightning. When he dies, he dispels all debuffs for allies within a pretty decent radius, and hits tiles within this area with his signature terrain effect. This effect causes enemies with flying or cavalry type movement to have to burn extra mobility to move onto these tiles. It also gives infantry or aquatic allies who move onto the tiles a Spirit Boots-like opportunity to move again after combat, so it's good for you, bad for them. His 3-cost skill is a big 3-line AoE attack that pushes enemies backwards and also applies his terrain effect. The skill also has a passive component which is basically Landius's traditional aura, reducing incoming crit rate, range damage, and boosting healing effects. He also has Landius's classic self-revive passive skill, Indomitable. He's a member of Yales Legends buffed by Landius and Sigma, and Mythical Realm buffed by Gizaroff and himself. His faction buff for Mythical Realm increases range damage dealt by 12% and removes a debuff if you end your turn without dealing damage. For bonds, he still doesn't roadblock anyone else's bonds for the time being, but for all we know he could eventually be needed for some upcoming original characters, so we'll see. For his own bonds, he needs the Knight of Mystery for his defensive bond, and Listel for his attack bond. For content, in PvE, he's on faction for Phoenix in Eternal Temple, and Fenrir and Needhog in Ancient Beckoning. Of these, I can see him being perhaps maybe useful in the fight against Needhog. Not that his terrain effects will stymie the Slimies, but more that he can help boost your infantry friends' mobility options on that phase. Probably not going to be enough to displace one of the entrenched meta picks for that fight, but if you're still putting together a team, maybe it's an option. On the PvP side, he's still a powerful and dynamic meta pick for Apex Arena. Being able to slow down characters like Ares and Elwyn can prevent you from getting rushed by high mobility units. The push from his 3C can be deadly late in a match when the fog is closing in, but it can also be used tactically to push tank-locking threats like Jugler away from your units. One of my favorite things to do is to use the Move Again bonus from his tiles to creep up and blast a distant enemy with someone like Tiny Jessica, and then retreat back to my teammates. For availability, the Sage of the Trees is going to be coming back on yet another raid-up banner, his third in a row, alongside Illustrial in September. Oh, and for availability for Rainforce, he's actually not showing up on the predicted banner schedule again. There is a different Rainforce coming out in July, but that's an entirely different character. So this means we know normal, original Rainforce won't be coming back to headline a banner until at least September. Okay, so here's the quick and dirty. We have Rainforce, who's a powerful AoE disruptor. He can pile on a lot of debuffs, and he unlocks the attack bonds for Brenda, Shalinka, and Virash. We also have the Sage of the Trees, who's a PvP-focused stalling and support unit. He has a self-revive and a defensive command aura, and he also has a faction buff for Mythical Realm. So finally, here's my reminder about upcoming banners. Next week, we should be getting a Legion of Glory Destiny banner featuring some pretty solid units in Helena, Ilusha, and Illustrial. The week after that will be the return of the all-time classic Elwyn, Leon, and Bernhardt Destiny banner, and that one's usually a good time for newer accounts to plug a big hole in their lineups with a guaranteed Destiny summon. Looking ahead to the next major update, the next brand new characters we'll be getting in May are Kruger and Vincent. I've said it before, but if you like debuffs, you're going to be interested in what Kruger can do for you. Alright, so that's it for this episode. I hope you found this video and these summaries helpful. Let me know if you plan on summoning on this banner, and also let's give CATA some love in the comments for educating us in the ways of the rain. As always, thanks so much for watching, and I'll catch you in the next Should You Summon. Extra special thanks, of course, to our Langrisser tier channel members Levitt, Derek Gunderson, and Kyle Greer-Brown, as well as all of our gold tier members. Your support is a big help in keeping these coming week after week after week after week after week.